begin recording. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Young here. I am the lead facilitator at True North Self-Directed Learning Community in Santa Barbara, California. And I am here today with Amahla Johnson. And she is the wonderful mama of an unschooled daughter who is 16 years old now. I have an unschooled daughter who's 17 years old. And Amahla is a sound and energy healer and also a great writer, and has written a number of articles that you can find on her website. That's embodied-wisdom.net, and can go there and check out more about Amahla, which I highly recommend. And I first met Amahla when we were both on the True Network, which is an online community that Zakia Ismail, Akila Richards, and Kelly Lime Taylor started. Back in December, they had an unschooling conference. It was focused on like unschooling for radical social change, I think is what they titled that conference. And so on that platform, Amahla started a group called Unschooling and the Body-Mind Connection, I believe.
Yeah.
And of course, I wanted to jump in on that action, two of my favorite subjects together. So that's when I started talking with Amahla, and we've been meeting through that group since December, about once a month, and having some really, really wonderful conversations with that community. I'm so grateful that these conversations are happening. So thank you, Amahla, for being here. I'm super excited to be able to speak with you and have a little dive into topics around unschooling, self-directed learning, motherhood, healing, all kinds of things we might touch on today. So
yeah,
thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'll just also mention that I have another blog, which is actually my homeschooling blog. And it's called nostalgiaforthefuture.wordpress.com. And it's just like kind of like an anonymous blog where I used to put our homeschool stuff. And I don't write in it now as much as I did when my daughter was young. But it's I think there's some good sort of very sort of homeschooling or unschooling specific stuff on there. So if anybody wants to look at that.
Great. And say that again. It's nostalgia for the future.
.wordpress.com. Yeah.
.wordpress.com. That's a great name.
Thanks. Yeah, it comes from the Reggio Emilia approach, I think. Like just this, I can't remember, it comes from a quote or a speech or something, but I was really I'm in my thinking around homeschooling, I was really influenced by the Reggio Emilia approach when my daughter was young. And it's kind of like unschooling in school. It's kind of like a method of, early learning that happens in preschools in Italy, but it has like a lot of very deep and sort of social change informed tenets in it. And it gave me some, when my daughter was young, I wanted just a few structures to help me to figure out how am I going to do this? Because it's sometimes when unschooling or whatever, or self-directed learning is a bit better, but it doesn't really tell you what it is or how to start doing it. It kind of just says space, but like with no no kind of step by steps, right? So I ended up kind of taking the Reggio Emilia kind of pieces of that and using that in my sort of homeschooling, unschooling. So that's where the name comes from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Reggio Emilia, but I hadn't heard that quote before, or that phrase. So
right.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, so I just thought we could jump in with finding out a little bit more about, what brought you feel like to being a parent that would choose unschooling or the self-directed learning path for you and your child. I could maybe just say that Amahla is a single mom, so she, has been doing all of this on her own with her daughter, and maybe you might want to speak a little bit to that too, just how that might be affected. But
Yeah, totally.
yeah, just some different things that maybe you feel like helped kind of prep you to take that step onto the path,
Yeah.
the path less traveled.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting to kind of think. You sent me the question, so I thought about that a little bit, and it's hard to know where to start, right? Like, where, does it start when my mom taught me to read at 3, and so then I was reading all by myself, so then I like was pretty self-directed, and in my own way with my learning. Does it, or she like had like she was didn't work as a teacher in Canada, but she was a teacher, and she had these John Holt books, and I read them in elementary school, so that informed my thinking. So there's like little steps all along the way. But in terms of like, if I think just from how I ended up being able to actually like choose that after my daughter was born, I think that when I was pregnant, I found a baby sign book in a library gift store. And I went, oh, it just sort of like, I was like, oh, this could be so much fun. Like this idea of like dialogue and learning with a kid. And I think I started thinking about homeschooling right then. But then her dad left pretty early on. And then I sort of thought, oh no, I can't do this. And then when she was about preschool age, I was looking into preschools, and I was living in a small town, and I couldn't get a space anywhere. And so I just started doing stuff with her at home. And then that just never, it was just so fun that I just never really ever felt like it was the right point to stop. And yeah, and so I just continued. And yeah, I think also like I thought a lot about the way that my health and my concerns around fostering health and well-being, I feel like really are a huge player in my choices, because I had a chronic illness when I was young, and I had to really work to heal from that. And the way that I learned to do it was through centering my own sensations and my own body processes. Until, and just listening to my body step by step by step. And it helped me kind of recreate myself as a person, as well as like heal like the things I was dealing with. And and I think a lot of adults have that issue of like, having gone through things that alienate them from themselves. And then they have to do something to get back to being able to hear themselves. And so I think it caused me to go, well, how could I raise a child so they don't have to go through that process of like self-alienation, and then I have to fight to get it back, fight to have the ability to feel what they feel and know what they know, and trust their own process, and like, not be separated from themselves. So I think that was, part of it. And it comes down to basic things like, I didn't want her to have to sit all the time if her body didn't want to sit. I didn't want her to have to wear shoes if she didn't want to wear shoes. I actually feel like all those little things where kids know what they want, they know what they need, and their body has like so much wisdom, and then we just beat it out of them. So I didn't, yeah, so it was kind of like, okay, well, I had to like, and also because of my work, like my sense of myself is such a part of my work. Like I literally use my own body sensations to help other people. So I know the value of that. I know how it's a very, yeah, I don't know. It's just such a powerful skill in my own life. And so I just knew the value of it, and just how, and how can we just, my intuition has, saved me so many times in my life. And how do you preserve that? Through not making it normal to not feel, to not listen to your body, to not follow your own impulses and your own intuitions. So yeah. Does that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just it feels the same to me in terms of having done a lot of somatic work before I had my daughter, and then once I had her in my life, just following intuitively what felt best in an embodied way. And then I actually thought I would put her in a school and started her with a charter school kindergarten program. We were living in Portland, Oregon at the time, and very quickly became dismayed with what was happening, and realized, and it was very much a somatic realization of, this just does not feel right. It feels
Yes.
like a force outside of our family is coming in and trying to dictate everything that we're going to do for the next 12 years. And I just had this full body no to that. But if I hadn't maybe trusted my bodily knowing so much, I maybe wouldn't have found it as easy to choose that other path. And it's just so ironic because, like you're saying, in school, it often is a matter of for those 6-7 hours, however long you're in school each day, that you're physically really being told what to do almost the whole time. Sit here, have the blinders around you like this, pick up this pencil, and that level of micromanagement on the body was just
they have to it really encourages dissociation, because in order to continue to override your own the signals from your own body continuously, that's what you have to do. You have to not feel. You're like, oh, I want to run out. Oh, I feel unsafe with this teacher. Oh, I da 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 da. I think if I can just add, I think seeing different kinds of abuse in the school system help and in different kind of institutional contexts, helped me to make this decision. And also, I read a lot of Vandana Shiva when I was, a teen and in my early 20s, and really, resonated with the idea that an organism is healthy when it can self-organize. So I was able to, so I had to do the work to trust my own organism, but I also had this theory kind of showing and backing up how health and ecological systems comes from each organism being organized from its own insides, telling it what is right for it. Right. And then it's like an ecological negotiation between organisms, but the self, the right to self-organize is what healthy systems are made out of. And is it okay if I tell a little tiny story just about kind of the school system? So, because this is such a pivotal sort of moment in my life, and that's why I'm thinking of telling it. But I was in grade 2, and I had a teacher who was, she was okay, I guess, but there was a student who she continuously picked on. And at the time I couldn't, I was only in grade 2, so I didn't fully understand everything that was going on, but I've thought about this so many times over the years. And he was this blonde kid, but he had those kind of parents that are super progressive and kind of talk to their child as if they're adults, right? So he would know a lot, and they would be really upfront and talk about sex in a very open way. And he just had all this, technical knowledge, right? Kind of probably almost like a homeschoolery type parent, right? Very engaged, very respectful, and so he was really smart. And I think that was maybe a power challenge to the teacher. But what she would do is kind of pick on him and get the other kids to kind of attack him, but in these ways that were not visible. And then he would be having trouble, and his mom would come in, and she would be trying to figure out what's the problem. Why doesn't he want to go to school? Why is he having so much trouble? And the teacher would be so nice to him when his mom was there. As soon as his mom left, she was awful. And she would on purpose turn the other kids against him. And I remember being, I remember feeling this is really wrong. This is really not okay, what's going on. But I really didn't have the language to explain to anybody what was happening. There was no way that I could have communicated that. But what was really clear in that context is, you don't want to be this kid. His name was Zeus. but it was really clear to all the kids that you don't want to be Zeus. So you better not, you don't want the teacher to turn her wrath on you. So you better cooperate and attack Zeus when the teacher tells you to, right? Like it was like she would do things like she would pick things that he was doing and then be like, oh, everybody, Zeus is doing this. Everybody say, ew, Zeus, like that kind of thing. And I'm just like, stuff like that, you know, it's like, and the parent, I could see his mom just struggling to understand, like she'd be coming to the classroom and not being able to figure out why he was not feeling safe. And I'm sure if I couldn't verbalize it, I'm sure he couldn't verbalize what was going on either, clearly. So why are we putting our kids in this kind of situation, right? It's like, it's really undermining of a person's development, like to, you know, to be that kid where his parents are trying to raise him as an empowered person, and then he's in an institution where he's being targeted, but it's being covered up in this way that nobody will ever really know, right? So yeah, it's okay that I shared all that.
That was almost a replication of what happened when I sent my daughter to kindergarten. There was because I would volunteer in the classroom a couple times a week, and there was a kid in that classroom that the teacher would just single out, and she was doing it like, because she would do it right in front of me and everything. I think she was just unconscious about her behavior.
Yes.
And it was fairly subtle, but it was not, everyone knew exactly what was happening, and he was being singled out repeatedly. And, you know, and that was a big part of why I knew I couldn't change the system. And I was like, well, I'm just not going to have my daughter be participating in that kind of culture.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for me, like just the baseline of like safety, health, like a kid can't learn if they don't feel safe. A kid system will prioritize like health, or you like we should be like a healthy kid can learn. If a kid, you know, if a kid's health and like emotional safety and mental health is being undermined, like you can't even get to these levels of like complex learning. So why are we just, you know what I mean? We should just be focusing on just making sure these baselines are met.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and from those baselines being met, I feel like there's so much that we don't even know, like what could happen in terms of the creativity of the life force when it's not hampered by all of these enculturated, demands on the organism. If we were living in a baseline healthy state, self-organizing in relationship to others in a supportive environment, what kind of society could we start to create together? I feel like we don't even know yet, you know.
Yeah.
But like having that level of a deep trust in life, in the life force that wants to move through us. I think in one of your articles you mentioned, I had made a note about it. You spoke about evolutionary needs in terms of supporting families. And it reminds me of that, you know, like to trust in that deeper evolutionary movement that wants to come through if we don't put everybody in the boxes of the school system that was developed 100 years ago, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that write about like how aberrant and like ahistorical so much of what we do in the sort of like Western modern, you know, like we're so sedentary. It's unmatched like in our evolutionary history, right? Or like the way that like the needs that like babies like, or you know, baby organisms are led to expect from like the human evolution, you know, all the level of like adaptations and things that we've made, like just their expectations, how much they're not being met in our culture. There's that woman who has that concept of the evolved nest. I think her name is, do you know who I'm talking about?
I just came across her work through the Tending the Roots.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
She's right up this alley, right?
Yes, exactly. But I feel like what she's saying has been said by many people over a long period of time. Like you could, like the continuum concept. I don't know if you ever read that. Jean Lee Loff. And
Yeah, I haven't read that, but I've heard about, yeah.
yeah, I was lucky to have read that before I had my daughter. So there were certain things that I think that I had exposure to that luckily before I actually had a baby that helped me to trust my own instincts. And I think also there was something about um, just something about I think I wonder sometimes about how my birth process with her uh, helped me to trust my instincts uh, around everything that I did because they were so loud. I had to go against so many things in culturally and socially and in my community to do the things that I felt were right, but I couldn't not do them because they were so loud to me. And so I think about that sometimes and wonder about why was I able to do that? Um, and I think, like if I followed one track, like the track of like, I breastfed until she was 5 and I did these things. And so it's kind of like if you're staying within the logic of that and you just follow it, there's never a point where it suddenly makes sense to jump off that track into this other track that's completely like non-biological, like non-connected feeling, like makes no sense. Like, and it just doesn't, like I'll be like with my baby and then suddenly I'll decide it's completely okay to not see my baby hardly ever. Like there's no point where that makes sense. Right.
Right. Yeah, my daughter's 17. It still doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Or like I want to be able to attune to my child. At what point does it make sense to suddenly decide it's not a good idea to attune anymore? Right? If you started on that track and that's how you get your information and that's what you've used to parent, you never get to the point where you're like, yeah, I think I'll just go the other way now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what you just said about, that's through the attunement is how
Yes.
so much, right? And
Yes.
that's a question that tends to come up when you don't have your child in conventional schooling structures. Like, how do you measure, how do you know that they're learning, and, it's like, well, how do you know when they're ready to stand up or walk or, any of those other things that come early on? It's very natural, but I feel like that can just continue, but culturally we don't get told that, and actually that woman that you mentioned, Darsha Narvaez, I think, is her name. Yeah, and Narvaez, and she calls it competitive detachment, which I think is a great phrase for what our culture does. It's like we get rewarded for detaching.
Yes.
It's like a competition. How well can we detach from our children?
Yeah.
Push them out into the world.
People go a little bit crazy when you're not doing it, right? Like there's so much kind of like pressure. And I mean, and it was sort of from my own sort of more cultural background, there definitely was like a voice that said, don't give them what they want. If they want it, that's when you can't give it. If they're crying, then you don't go to them because you have to make sure that they know you're in charge, you're the boss, right? So it's like if they show the need, you deliberately don't meet it, or you kind of enforce independence. And it's like because you're afraid that if you don't force independence when they say they don't want it, then they'll never become independent. And like it's that kind of like deep lack of trust in our own like our own instincts and in the sort of in the child's knowledge of what they know in their communications and what they're asking for. It's just like such a deep lack of trust in the human organism, which I think really, I mean, I really see it as part of, I know in my family history, Christianity plays a big part in undermining the trust in people's own, trusting their own experience. You always were like, well, you disempower yourself. Like, oh, I don't, like with schooling, it's like, oh, I don't know enough to teach my child. I have to get an expert, like, or I don't know enough. I have to read a parenting book. I can't actually trust my own gut instincts about or feelings about what's happening with them. I need to know, if something's not working, I need to, impose something from the outside that's like an expert view, rather than just
Yeah.
sourcing deeper from, kind of like if you could actually just feel deeper into the situation, there would be answers there. But we're already on this, like, don't trust, we're originally bad. So anything that comes from us is just like, has to be dismissed or something. And we're just like, I feel like you and I were on the track of like, just the opposite. We're like, listen, but only listen deep, listen deeper. Yeah.
It's certainly, in self-directed learning, they say, that the foundation or the soil is trust. And I feel like that's the truth about life, right? That is the truth about life, and any kind of spiritual path you might want to be on, it comes back to trust. And so for me, the self-directed learning process with my daughter has really just been an extension, or just a seamless kind of whole with all of life, which is always asking us to trust more and to to trust more, basically. And it's been a very holistic pathway in that way for us.
Yeah, I
Sounds
think it
like for
both
you
brings
too.
up, because I think trauma gets in the way of your trust of yourself. So when you unschool, I think it's normal for your own like trauma to kind of come up to be examined. Like, where am I not trusting myself and not trusting my child, and where did I get damaged, that so now that I can't trust? And it both helps you build that trust, and it brings up the challenges to trusting. Yeah, do you think that's true?
Like all of Yes, yeah. With all of parenting, I feel like no matter what you're doing, lifestyle choice wise, it's parenting brings up our own past
Yes.
experiences and the actual experiences.
Yeah.
That's why it's so healing. It can
Yeah.
be, if we are able to meet it as best
Yeah.
we can.
Yeah. Yeah. And you
Yeah.
really need support to meet the challenge, right? Like, if you have something that was a trauma, it was a trauma because you were overwhelmed and didn't have the resources to metabolize that experience at that time. So when it comes up again, you need the support around it, so that then you can metabolize it now, and then get the gift from it, like get the energy back from it, and then it becomes like learning for you, right? So yeah, I mean, it's a
Yes.
whole thing of like how, yeah, I think when you're like, the unschooling path in some ways is still pretty unusual, or not as it's sometimes it's hard to find your supports to make sure that you're resourced enough to like metabolize things.
Yeah. When my daughter was growing up, there really weren't very many things available at all. Especially, there wasn't anything in the community where we live now. And that's a big part of why I wanted to,
Yeah.
start the True North community, is just to give people that support system, so that you don't have to go it alone.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And same,
have
like,
like-minded folks that you're.
yeah. I was gonna say, so I started a group for BIPOC homeschoolers in Ontario, and it's similar reasons, because there's, I mean, the homeschooling community is not very diverse here, and I had certain challenges, and I just wanted to encourage and create support for people of color to homeschool, because I think it's can be so. I think it's a real healing thing, and I think it's very, very important. Like something that I've been thinking about recently, or talking about recently. I was at a conference for STEM ed, but specifically looking at issues of diversity and equity in STEM education. But I was having a conversation about homeschoolers that I know who are, Indigenous, and are trying to raise their children as first language speakers, even though they themselves are not fluent, and they are only second language learners of their own cultural like language, right? But just how important it is now, because so many indigenous languages are on the verge of extinction, basically. Just how deep that work is to try to raise the next generation like steeped in their own culture, like and not and anytime there's like I mean, there's this tension about, I think, for indigenous kids of like, sort of like, I think sometimes about sort of any energy that's going towards like success in the Western system is also but that kind of has to happen just for survival to some extent. But like, what is it robbing from them of getting like the transmission of cultural knowledge, right? And how is that contributing to the erasure of of indigenous people? Yeah. So it's really, some of this is very deep, right?
Yeah. And of course, it's pretty, it's so blatant to look at how Western schools have robbed indigenous cultures and continue to do so. It's been one of the main tools, along with religion, to decimate indigenous cultures. And I feel like, sometimes it can be like for white people, like we don't think that that's applies to us. But I feel like as a person who's thematically oriented, that that these more conventional ways of schooling that ignore the body, that ask for conformity and so on, that that it's robbing any human of their indigenous nature. And so, all of us need to return to our indigenous nature to find the wisdom to move forward. I feel like, in terms of being healthy enough as a society to continue living on this planet, that it lies in our indigenous roots, whatever those are for all of us, which I feel, like we all have a body. So I feel like just in the embodied experience, and the wisdom that emerges from there is where we can find those connections to move, to take back the power, stop giving it away to the schools, to the religious institutions, to the governments, to the, and really live from a place of that emergent knowing that is life coming through us to thrive.
I sort of thought that's coming to me is like, there's kind of like, a lot of times we think about abuse as like, the imposition of violence, right? But I think like with developmental trauma and early trauma, it's actually a big trauma is just a need for connection that is not met, right? So like a baby literally cannot regulate their physiology in such a way that they can concentrate on growth and development if they don't get connection, if they don't get touch, if they don't get attunement, if they don't get, soothed by another person's nervous system coming to hold them in different ways. That's a trauma. That's a life and death situation for that infant, right? So I think lack of connection, I think we just think, oh, it would be nice to have connection, but disconnection's okay. But in fact, it's a life and death situation when we're continuously not allowed to connect with ourselves. And also like the connection with land, connection with sort of like other species and whatever, that's also a trauma, right? That's also a connection that then takes away our ability to feel not in this life and death physiology and in this life and death psychology. So I think a lot of the benefits of like self-directed learning is just the preservation of life-giving connection. Like just to give the connection when the connection is needed. is you just make a completely different trajectory for that child. And then when it's multiple children, it's a cultural trajectory change.
Yeah.
People want their kids to have nature connection, but that nature connection, even the capacity for the connection to land as an animate being, is starting, in the womb, is starting, right as soon as a child's born. And the way that the social milieu that they're in is responding to their natural being, right? It's like that capacity for connection, that sensitivity of attunement, like that's setting the what's the word, like it's setting the baselines right there. So it's like, if you're not doing it then, sending them to nature camp when they're 10, like, the baselines have already been set. The imprints of, like, kill or be killed are like they're set like way, like, or like hierarchical modes are already wired in from, like, in these really early times. Is the world friendly and will it support me, or is it dangerous and I'm here just, having to keep myself alive by myself and not trust other people? Like, that's all, like, the first 2 years, 3 years of your life. It's already decided. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Can I trust?
Yeah.
Can I be open? Can I prioritize learning, or do I have to prioritize survival?
Yeah. And then those things can be healed later, but it's a lot more
Yeah.
effort to bring a lot of awareness to it. And of course, we're all on that journey of healing whatever, is ours to heal. But that for me too, that's a part of, I know this is what I share with you, is this idea of, offering our children a space to self-direct and, to be in an unschooling setting is because it's a healing path to take. It's a healing environment. And that, I know for me, that was probably the main reason I chose it. What do you think are some of the real core benefits of choosing unschooling or self-directed? I mean, we've touched on some for sure, but for you and your daughter, what are you feeling?
Yeah. I think I have, like, a lot of thoughts. I'm still processing something that you just said there about the healing. Because I just, as soon as you said, like self-directed learning gives children a space to, I think learning and healing are so close, like they're kind of the same thing, right? But it's a sacred space. So in a way, it's like you're creating sacred space for kind of like intimate self-work to happen, whether that's learning or growing or healing. Like, that's all, like, you know what I mean? Like that it's like by giving permission for self-direction, you're kind of saying, here, have the sacred space to have your process that helps you write yourself and, like, and develop yourself. So anyway, sorry, I just had to verbalize that. But yeah. So can you just repeat the question? What are the main benefits? Is that right?
I mean, well, we just kind of, I feel like, touched on a core benefit in both of our eyes, but is there anything else that you would say about what the benefits have been for your daughter and for you so far? Because there's still lots of growing and parenting that's ahead, but both our daughters are of an age where you can definitely look back and see what some of those benefits have been.
Yeah. I'm enjoying looking back. I talked to my daughter about what she thought the benefits were, and she said to me something I thought was really sweet and interesting. And she said, I don't know if it's unschooling or if it's that I just really like you. And I thought, and I was like, that's unschooling right there. I just don't know how many 16-year-olds would be saying that to their parent. My daughter's very, like, our relationship is so positive. And going through the pandemic, I just was like, just all the time grateful for how good our relationship is, because it's a lot, like, Toronto's been under lockdown for over a year with just like a few little breaks, you know, like a month of like, okay, now we're moving down one level. Oh, nope, sorry, stay at home again. So it's just like me and her and me and her and me and her, right? But like, but we've done pretty okay because our relationship is so good. And that's definitely from having the path that we've had with, you know, both we were kind of our own little learning community. You know, she's learning and I'm learning, and we talk to each other about what we're learning, and we learn from each other. And I think that's just like so positive. Um, but other benefits, I would say, like as a single parent, uh, I would recommend this as a life hack for anyone who's a single parent. Because when you bring things under your own control, you lose less energy. So for instance, so I work for myself, so I get that, you know, so I'm not you know, I control my own time, right? And then with not having the school system kind of dictate the priorities, I'm bringing that kind of in-house. And by having the flexibility and the control over those things, I was able to really maximize my resources that I did have. You know, like her dad wasn't involved at all, right? He's contributed financially very minimally. So it's really just all me. But through being able to kind of really listen to what her system is telling her and what my system is telling me, it's like we're just adapting to her and me, and we don't have to think about anybody else's agenda, right? And when you know, and this was something like when I first was getting into looking at homeschooling on one of these sort of Yahoo groups, somebody said, if you want to do it as a single parent, you need to work for yourself, you need to unschool, and you need to like cooperate with other single parents. And that was like this gem of information for me. So I did all those things. And that, so, but just, you know, and then I think as a single parent, there's so much pressure to prioritize making money and farm out care of your child to somebody else. Like when she was a baby, people were like, isn't it just get the right babysitter? You know, but in fact, I did the opposite, and it was just such the right thing for me to do. It was like, you know, they want me to give the care away, but no, I'm bringing the care even, you know, I'm going to take it all on. I'm going to just try to, you know, because the thing is, the more you parent, the better at parenting you get. So when you don't spend, you know, so when you spend long periods of time away from your child, it's actually very difficult to then switch gears and do it well, because you're not in practice in a way, right? Like I would see this, my mom ran a daycare, and I would see when Penelope was a baby, I could see that the parents whose kids were in the daycare 10 hours a day, they were also the people that were asking the daycare staff, can you look after my child before or after daycare or on the weekend? And it was almost like they just weren't spending enough time, so that being with their own kids was so difficult for them. And you really need to like build, I think nature is like, you know, builds in these things where it's like, it makes it so that you're gradually developing your skill and your tolerance and your resources. You know, you exercise and you rest and you come back and you're stronger, right? And that's how natural systems work. You stress the system a little bit, you give it some recovery, and then it bounces back stronger. So by taking on more parenting, it actually made it easier. So that's one thing I would say, and it makes it more exciting because you get more out of it. So like the same thrill that I felt like when she walked for the first time, I get the same thrill like over and over through her whole life. I'm like, oh, when she read for the first time, when she wrote for the first time, every little new thing that she does, it's like, oh my God, it's like, it's like another like moment of just revelation. Like the other day she did this beautiful recording on GarageBand, and I was just like, wow, like, you know, like you just, you know, you did, you know, you used all the multi-tracks and it just sounds amazing. It's just the same, you know, you can just take the same joy. It just brings more joy. I guess that's the thing. Because I think single parenting can be such a grind, and it just helps take the joy of childhood, and you just have it with you all the time. Yeah. What else could I say have been the benefits? Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is like practical, logistical, in terms of conserving my time and my energy, and deciding for myself what I think deserves prioritization, right? So, and not, it's not somebody else's priorities. And then I would say like relationship. And also just I've really noticed that she goes through periods of binge learning. So I feel like learning can go very deep, very fast, with very little effort on the parent's part. If you just let the child, like you kind of put the container in a certain way that gives permission, it's almost like the child does it themselves. Like it's just so efficient, right? Like my daughter learned to write, went from not writing at all to, in 3.5 months, writing at an adult level. Like having never written, then learning to spell and spelling terribly, and then suddenly like spelling like an adult. Like when she was 8, she just went through that period of time, and I've seen her do it with other stuff where she just goes so deep. And I'm sure you've seen that too with your daughter. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be the natural way of learning that I've seen with my child and with a lot of the other people I've talked to about it over the years. When you allow for the natural space,
Yeah.
there's a lot of what looks like maybe more like fallow time,
Yes.
in the garden, but then when it's time to grow, it's just like bam, out comes the growth in really strong spurts of
Yeah.
learning. And then,
Yeah.
then at other things, they maybe like go and recede and go in and then recede for years. And you think, oh,
Yes.
maybe they're never going to really grab onto that type of learning. And then one day, they're doing just fine with it, and so
Yeah.
it takes all different shapes and forms, but definitely like kind of plodding along at the same pace for 12 years, that definitely is not the
Yeah.
how
It's
it
like
seems to
pushing the
naturally
boulder up the hill. Yeah. Yeah. It makes no sense. Yeah,
go.
I mean, I feel like I have a lot to say on this particular topic, like about the preservation of motivation, is like an interesting topic, because because I think that because I just went to this, STEM conference, and it's all like science educators, and every conversation was just like how to motivate the kids, how to engage the kids. Oh, what a good idea to motivate the kids. You like take a picture of their creation and it gets to be on the website and they're so excited. Oh, but it's like they're scrounging and grabbing for this motivation. And like I never I never have to work to motivate my kid ever to do very much. Like, and she's become very skilled at certain things, but like she plays the guitar every day for a few hours, but it's not like how when I was a kid and my parents had to nag me and force me and punish me to get me to practice the piano or something like that. Like it's never like that, right? So it's really, when you're trying to force feed or kind of artificially motivate, it actually destroys the child's internal motivation, and that's something that I think is pretty, like the maintenance of internal motivation. Being able to take that into adulthood is really powerful, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And also people having, like, another benefit I would say of unschooling the way that we did it, or how I did it, was just she just had long periods of time to go deep into something, right? And she could follow these kind of like I think of them as like dopamine loops, right? Where you have a little success, and then it drives a little more success and a little more. Like you just have these loops of micro success that like build, but it's all like your own process. Like nobody else is interfering with it. It's just like you taking a step and then self-correcting, and you learning from your own process until it just, and I noticed she's very good at self-correcting. And in fact, it's hard for her sometimes, and I think about this sometimes, it's hard for her to want to learn or take, like even with like one-on-one teachers, she often feels like she's not learning very much compared to what she could learn on her own.
Mm-hmm.
And she always comes away being like, what was the point of that? And yeah, so I think there's like the preservation of motivation and the efficiency of learning that I think and also like self-directed learning can happen on these multi levels all at once, right? So even if you don't care about relationship, and you don't care about like, social emotional learning, and you don't care about, like, if you only care about cognitive outcomes, you don't care about physical health, you don't care about anything, you only care about that, you still should choose self-directed learning. right? Because because you know, it can be so efficient.
Yeah, and also we could add there to say, because I think some people think that self-directed or unschooling means no regular type academics, but that's not what it means. It just means there's no coercion, right? It's
Yes.
if your child wants to go study physics when they're 7 or whatever, then they do that. It's not. There's no limitations. It's a removal of limitations that would otherwise keep their learning smaller. But it really just is, in this day and age where information is so easily accessed. That's not where we're lacking. Now what we need is,
Yes.
I feel like what you spoke so eloquently to earlier, is the connection, so that connection to self, connection to others, connection to the earth, so that we can feel at home in ourselves and as earthlings, and then we can really from there reach out for all the knowing that we will intrinsically feel motivated to reach for. um, and yeah, and that's the just trusting that will happen. And once you have daughters or children that are as old as ours, it's like now we get to sit back and say, well, the proof is in the pudding. Look
Yeah.
at, we
Yeah.
walked that path.
Yeah.
It
I
really
don't,
worked. And I know it's
yeah.
not so easy for parents.
Sorry, say that again. It's not so easy.
It may be not so easy for when you're at the beginning of your parenting journey to
Yes.
take that step, because you don't have the proof in the pudding yet.
Yeah, yeah. I found that right around when my daughter was like 12 or 13, I stopped worrying so much because I had seen her learn these skills that supposedly were so hard to learn so easily. Like she taught herself to read. She, learned to write very quickly, and she, yeah. So I stopped kind of worrying about it. And I don't necessarily feel like the proof is in the pudding yet, because I think I still have a certain amount of anxiety about the launching into adulthood phase. And I think it has to do with, yeah, I have to think a little bit about this, but maybe it's because she's got some fear about it, right? It's like we've done, like I think that, like if we just kind of took a snapshot of her right now, I could be happy with what, how it's gone, whatever. She's very like, like I really enjoy her. She's witty. She like, she knows stuff. She's got a political analysis that I'm just like, wow, like how do you have that? I only kind of got that like, in my 20s or something, or, I mean, I think kids today are a lot more savvy about all this stuff, but but she really gets the subtleties of things, and she has these sort of baseline adult skills, and I could be happy about that. But for us, I think that place where there's challenge has to do with sort of cultural integration. So I think she still has fears about that. Um, so I think I feel a bit like, oh, like I don't really know exactly how it's going to go. And also the world is really changing right now. It's kind of changing faster per unit of time than maybe it was before. So like I do feel like that this kind of learning makes so much more sense if you just look at the way that the world is going. Like all these people who now have to like have their kids learning at home, right? It's like if you've been doing home learning is easy, but you have to start like people who think, because school is relying on kind of like everybody else is doing it, so I guess I'll do it too. Like kids kind of go along because the structure kind of supports that. And then there's also like like grade systems and like authority kind of structure, hierarchical structure kind of gets the kids to do the thing. But then when the kids are at home, all that these artificial things that created the motivation are not there. So what are you going to do? Right? You're gonna have to need to do something different, and you have to kind of then have a different relationship to understanding what learning is and how motivation works, and like how to support somebody in their own process, right? Because like being I know here parents are just going nuts trying to like, they have to spend their whole day with their kid on the Zoom from like 9 to 3. Just they have to sit there with their kid to make sure the kid stays in front of the screen to like do this online, like, and I can't even understand what's going on right now, because like if you were a homeschooler, you would never choose that. You would just have like, especially for kids in elementary school, like, why would you be putting them on the screen for that long? Like, it's bad for their health and development, and they're not absorbing very much, and it's actually torture for them. And so, you know what I mean? So it's like you have to have a whole other different paradigm of understanding. And if learning is now going to be going online, everything's going to change. How people work and how people learn is gonna have to rely on these new ways of doing things. These old, this
Yeah.
old way is going away. So much better to like have your child know how to sense their own body, know what they need, know how to advocate and ask for those needs to get met, know how to balance their day, know how to motivate themselves, know how to collaborate, have empathy, and all these skills are built through not school.
I mean, and that's some families find that they have children that maybe can do parts of this, school system, and it works for them. But I find I think that that's just really individual, which kids find that structure works for them. Like they can maintain their sense of self and still navigate that system. Other kids, that doesn't work at all for it. It just depends on I feel like on the individual, but I think it's very difficult for younger, like pre-puberty kids for sure, to navigate a system that's very, top-down structured and maintain a sense of connection to self. I just think that's really hard for them to do. Once you get a little older, like you know, my daughter started at 14 taking some city college classes, and she could enter that type of system then and navigate it still as very connected to herself.
Yeah.
Because she was old enough to do that.
Yeah.
She'd done enough, becoming herself already, free of those kinds of demands, that she was able to do that. And so I think, yeah, depending on the person, you can enter the system, and especially if you're a little older, and navigate it. And that's the other thing actually with homeschoolers, unschoolers, they do very well in traditional or conventional schooling when they choose to go there, if they do choose that.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think for your daughter, it makes me think of like what you've done, an entrepreneurial pathway. Like, I feel like, that is probably the wave of the future. I can't remember, recently I read something about how many more jobs are actually, entrepreneurial jobs now, because the old ways of employing people are, dying off. And so really that's what we need to be preparing our young people for, is be able to go out and kind of make their own, trust themselves, create something in the world. And and that's
even have the self-esteem
to do if they're.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there, but I was going to say, even have the self-esteem and the chutzpah to do that. And you need to have connection to self to put yourself out there. And yeah, I think a lot about sort of I think the economy rewards uniqueness, but the school sets you up for conformity. So even financially, it doesn't really make sense, right? Like people, like if you study just like marketing or whatever, it's all about like your unique selling proposition. It's like what makes you unique and different, right? But in a school system where there's a penalization on being different, it doesn't set people up to work in that entrepreneurial mindset. So I know a lot of people homeschool just because they care, because they're business people or creative people, and they know that they know that that's not that the school system kind of undermines that function, those kind of functions. And I was thinking about what you were saying about sorry, there's something that I wanted to catch there. See if I can bring it back. It might just be escaping me. Anyway, just that I feel like everything becoming more entrepreneurial, I think is true. And
Yeah. Yes, it's a it's a whole new world that's emerging. We don't know what's coming around the bend, but staying connected to our children is certainly, I feel like, the most important thing we can do.
Yeah.
Um, and that idea of roots and wings, to give them those connected roots, and so that then they can fly where they will when the time is right.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
I know that we've talked for quite a while already, and I
Yeah.
could talk for hours more
Never
on
know.
all these topics with you.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
there anything else you would like to add before we bring it to a close?
Um, yeah, I wanted to say something about my I'm trying to remember what my daughter said, because she said some really interesting things when I talked to her about, like, what do you think the challenges were and what do you think the benefits have been and that kind of stuff. And she said that she really doesn't see any downsides to unschooling. It's only kind of in the interface with other people that sometimes things become a problem. And she said, like, if if your homeschooling community is really small, then that can be difficult, like, because you don't have, your friend group could be limited, or you have to stay the same friends with people like your whole life or something. But I actually see that kind of a little bit as a plus. But anyway, it's like the village. But yeah, and she said something really interesting about how she feels like she was able to be creative without a lot of inhibitions, um, without and yeah, and I can really see for her, like, music is a very natural language for her. She did not learn it in the context of like anything academic or having anybody else's expertise imposed on her, or anybody else's aesthetics or standards imposed on her. So she can do things that that are just to me, like, amazing. But it's because it was just really another language for her, like another, just like how spoken English would be a language. I really see music as a language for her, because it didn't get interrupted by sort of the schooly structure, is what she would say. But yeah, so she can like make up harmonies to things, but it's not being rooted through her head. She's not thinking, oh, here's the root, where's the minor third, where's the fifth. She's not thinking that. It's actually just bypassing language and thought altogether. And same, she can just like listen to a song on the radio and then she can just play it. So it's very like I see that as, and she sort of says that even when she does have, she's had some lessons, not a lot, she's mostly just taught herself, but she feels like she can feel that, um like the schooliness in there, and she can kind of feel how even it has the ability to undermine even what she is actually, quite natural in her and is strong in her. So I thought that was very interesting. um yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. She also said that she learned things when she was ready to learn them, and she could stay with things for as long as she wanted to or needed to. And yeah, and just had a lot of time, time to do stuff. And I remember too, like, there's kind of a different mentality I found with school. Everything's kind of chopped up into little bits. So if you try to have like a play date with somebody who goes to school, like when she was like younger, it's like they would only have like a short amount of time to spend with you. Like, we can have a play date for an hour, but like the homeschooling play date is 6 hours. So I would see the kids getting into these sort of flow states just from having all that time. So it was like a deeper interrelation, and more complex kind of play arises, and these kind of things, just by having space, just by having time, like new things arise. And like, by not tracking everything, something, by not constraining everything, something, sometimes you just get these peak experiences, and who doesn't want to live like, having peak experiences every day, right? So that's all.
That's all. Just peak experiences every day. That's
Yeah.
all. And, and it's not to over glamorize. Of course, it's all just life after all. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love what you just said about, I could really feel that, like those longer tidal rhythms of just
Yes.
allowing,
Yeah.
and what kind of intelligence is emerging and growing in us when we are allowed to do that. It's
Yeah.
beyond what we even really know about.
Yes.
Having most of us all have been raised in a very conditioned, Western schooly culture, and so yeah, what lies beyond that is
Yeah.
what's really fascinating to me, and what's
Yeah.
what draws me forward. Kind of like that name of your blog. It's nostalgia for the future. It's like
Yeah.
this feeling of what can be if we allow it space
Mhm.
to
Yeah,
grow.
and I like that title. I think I chose it partially because like you and I were talking about how our evolutionary history is like, I don't even know what it is. It's probably like something like 97% unschooling, right? Like humans like that, and or whatever. Like it's just like school is the aberration, right? So so in my nostalgia for the future, it's really just this is just what we're kind of built for. You know what I mean? We're built for, you know, daily flow state. We're built for, deep connection and joy, and we're built for these things. And, it's just like we just have to relax into it and like allow what's natural to be there. And I love what you said about the tidal states, because you and I are like craniosacral therapy people a little bit, but just yeah, like a long tide, like it's like living in long tide, right? Or at least mid tide. It's beautiful. It's like it's like you could have a life of beauty, right? As opposed to a life of tension. And yeah, and that's like that's what it's supposed to be. That's what we're supposed to be inheriting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, just like moving away from that concept that's so prevalent of like no pain, no gain, and moving more towards trusting the pleasure
Yes.
of,
Yeah.
of being. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we can do it.
Yeah. Thanks for this conversation.
Oh, thank you, Amala. I just love talking to you about all of this, and it's so fortifying. And so, thank you so much for taking time and having this deep conversation with me and with the people who will be listening in later.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to say that in case you wanted to look up Amala, please check her out at embodied-wisdom.net. And we'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks for listening.